Amy Winters and the Wisconsin Dairy Products Association. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to talk about is generative AI. And when you think about generative AI, what that really is a information technology. And where I'd like to start this talk is with a brief history of information technology. And where I'd like to start this talk is 200,000 years ago. So 200,000 years ago, the humans that walked on Earth were anatomically similar to you and I. But for 130,000 years, we lived basically like animals. There's hardly any progress in the fossil record whatsoever. I mean, can you imagine living in a world where the next 1,000 years looks like the last 1,000 years for 130,000 years? That's how humans, just as intelligent and just as ambitious as us, lived on this planet for 130,000 years. And then 70,000 years ago, something happened. Nobody knows what. It's known as the cognitive revolution, or the Great Leap. And what archaeologists tell us is there was an explosion of art, tools, and human migration. And what anthropologists tell us is we learned to talk. We never talked before. We discovered speech. We actually had to discover it. We actually invented language. We actually had to invent language so we could talk to each other. And every time we've changed how we connect, communicate, and collaborate, our world has fundamentally changed. You know, whether it was learning to talk 5,000 generations ago, or learning to write, or creation of libraries and universities, the printing press, radio, TV, internet, World Wide Web, social media, and now generative AI. Every time we've changed how we connect, communicate, and collaborate, our world has fundamentally changed to the point that we're on this exponential trajectory. And it doesn't matter what you plot. Gross domestic product, words written, energy consumed, water utilized. We are on this exponential trajectory because of this transformation of information technology. And so let me just talk a little bit about how our world is changing right before our eyes. The first thing that we see is that we're becoming much more digital as a species. If you look at the top 10 populations in the world, half of them reside on social media. There's actually more people living on Facebook than living in China. And if Facebook was its own country, not only would its population be greater than China, its GDP would be greater than the United States. And that was 2019. Today, there's only 2 countries left on the list. So the first thing I want you to take away is we're becoming much more digital than ever before. The second thing is that half our life now is spent staring at a screen, whether that's an iPhone or an iPad or a computer at work or a TV at home or the screen that you're looking at right now as I'm talking to you. Half of our life is now spent staring at a screen. 77% of all of our meetings are virtual. Even this meeting today is a virtual meeting, where at least one person is connected virtually, and many times everybody is connected virtually. Right now on the planet, there's over 1 billion people with some device attached to their body that is measuring their heart rate, their steps taken, the food they consume, how they're sleeping at night. So again, very connected as a species. The downside of all this is this year in 2024, it's estimated that 10.5 trillion with a T is going to be lost due to cybersecurity breaches. That's not just lost revenue, that's not just lost reputation, that's a ransom, that's lost productivity, that's shutting down operations. $10.5 trillion is going to be lost due to cybersecurity issues here in 2024. So, man, that's a lot of change. How do we navigate this rapidly changing world that we live in? The good news is we are incredibly resilient as a species. Let me go back just 100 years ago. And let's just pretend for a minute that we're a group of business leaders gathered here in Neenah, Wisconsin, trying to determine how do we get our businesses to grow? How do we stay competitive in this rapidly changing world? How do we position ourselves for the future? And in 1924, right at our fingertips were these new technologies that had been introduced to the world since the end of the American Civil War. Since 1865, we've seen the advent of electricity, the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, air conditioning. Just 19 years ago, in 1905, Albert Einstein published his papers that laid the foundation for solid-state physics, quantum physics, and the atomic bomb. These technologies completely revolutionized the 20th century to where this picture looks awfully quaint to us today. In just 45 years, we'll be walking on the moon. That's how transformative these technologies were, and we were able to roll with the changes of these advanced technologies. So let's fast forward to the present day. Here we are, a group of business leaders gathered in Neenah, Wisconsin, asking ourselves, how do we get our business to grow? How do we create competitive advantages with these technologies? And again, right at our fingertips are technologies that were introduced since the American Civil Rights Bill in 1964. So since 1964, same relative time frame as the previous one, we see nanotechnology. The ability to manipulate matter, atom by atom. Synthetic biology, the ability to manipulate life, gene by gene. Quantum computers, artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, blockchain technology, additive manufacturing like 3D printing, and now we're even seeing atomically precise manufacturing, the ability to make matter at the atomic and molecular level. And these technologies are going to radically change the 21st century, to the point where this picture is going to look just as quaint as the previous one. So yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. But what's it mean for business? I love these two photographs. These two photographs were taken on Fifth Avenue in New York City, exact same spot, 13 years apart. In 1900, it says spot the car. There's only one. Everything else is horse and buggy. Just 13 years later, spot the horse. There's only one. Everything else is automobile. And guess what? It's about to happen again. This says spot the driver. And the former vice chairman of General Motors has said by 2035, nobody will own or operate a vehicle. They'll all be self-driving, Uber-like cars. So again, change happens really fast. And I love this quote. You may have seen this quote. And again, stop me. I get on a roll. So please stop me if you're like, I don't believe that or whatever. But I love this quote. This quote is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. So right now, somewhere in the world, the way we're going to be living in 5 years is already happening. So the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. These two magazines were published on the exact same day, November 12th, 2007. The one on the left, the Forbes says Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Published on the exact same day, November 12th, 2007, is the best inventions of 2007. And right on the cover is the iPhone. That's how fast change happens. If you were to go back to 2007, right about the time that the iPhone was being introduced, none of these things existed. There was no Instagram, there was no Uber, there was no Bitcoin, there was no Tesla, there was no Spotify, there was no blockchain, no Airbnb, none of this stuff existed. And today, these brands have a market cap greater than $2 trillion. So what's driving this is if you think about every industry that was created in the 20th century, it was built on three things: oil, electricity, and steel. Every business, and businesses running today are still based on oil, electricity, and steel. But what we're going to see in the 21st century is data is the new oil. Artificial intelligence is the new electricity, and advanced robotics is the new steel. And I predict by 2035, there's only going to be two types of companies in the world: those built on data, AI, and robotics, and those companies that are completely out of business. And what's, the other thing to think about is you think about your business is how are you positioning your business to use the technology? So if you go back to the PC, and we all still use PCs, the interface is the desktop. You've got a keyboard and a screen. The logic is programs. You got programs that you run. And then the data is kept on a database. And when the internet was introduced, the interface was a browser, the logic was the website, and all the data was kept on servers. Where a lot of businesses operate today is Web 2.0. The interface is your mobile phone, the logic are the apps on your phone, and then the data is kept up in the cloud. But what we need to be designing for is 3.0. It's already here. And the interface is virtual reality, augmented reality, Internet of Things. The logic is going to be artificial intelligence and actually AI agents. I probably should change this to agents. And then the data is going to be kept in the blockchain. And the reason I show this slide is it's important to ask yourself, are you designing your business models for Web 3.0, or are you still optimizing Web 2.0? And what's that proper balance in your business model to interface with your customers? And it's all part of this evolution that we've been on since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. You know, Industry 1.0 with steam engines and mechanization and, you know, the whole textile industry. Web 2.0, you know, Henry Ford and mass production, the assembly line using electrical energy. You know, 1965, Moore, you know, Gordon Moore coined Moore's Law, which is computers are going to double in speed at half the cost every 18 months, which is the whole revolution of computers and automation. And where we are today is Industry 4.0, which is interfacing physical and computing power and computers together to create this massive network and create something called the smart enterprise. So what is a smart enterprise and how do you create a smart enterprise? So what I'm going to show you is two business models. And what I'm going to plot here is the value created by that business model divided by the number of people that use that product or service, plotted out by the number of people that actually use that product or service. And the first one I'll call an atom-centric. This is a company that's products offered. They make physical products and they generate revenue by moving atoms from one location to another, making a physical product, shipping it somewhere else, revenue happens. Companies like Nokia, Blockbuster, Kodak, Borders, taxis, and maybe your company. Maybe not, but maybe your company. The other type of business model is one that generates revenue from bits and bytes of information. They generate revenue by moving information from one location to another, and that generates revenue. Companies like Apple, Netflix, Instagram, Amazon, Uber, and perhaps your company or some company that's going to displace you. So think about your business model. Is it more of a product-centered business model or is it more of an information one? And it's not an either or, it's an and also. You know, I mean, Apple makes physical products, but they also use information. Amazon doesn't make physical products, but they do ship physical products from one location to another. You know, I had a great conversation with this guy. I'm going to digress for just a second. His name was Jeff Conway. And Jeff was the, he shared a cubicle with Jeff Bezos. They were both working for a derivatives company in New York City. And Jeff Bezos goes off to form Amazon. And he had a non-solicit. He couldn't talk to Jeff for 2 years. The way Jeff tells the story is at 12:01 a.m., he got a call from Jeff Bezos and said, come work for Amazon. He was employee number 11. And he's the one who created Amazon Web Services and Amazon Prime. And he was being solicited by the CEO of Uber. And the CEO of Uber said, come work for me. And Jeff said, why would I come work for you? What would I work on? And he said, well, what I want you to do is to move atoms from one location to another using bits and bytes of information to generate revenue, but those atoms can't make up a human being. That's how the CEO talked to him. And he came up with Uber Eats. It's not a human moving from one location to another using information. It was food. You know, so it's a whole different way to think about the integration of products and information. So those are the two types of business models. There's also two types of operating models. Products offered companies tend to operate in silos. You have these separate business units with their own P&L, their own IT department, their own data. You know, it turns out Nokia actually had a smartphone before Apple, but you could only buy a sport smartphone, a weather sport phone, a news sport phone, because they had a VP of news phones, a VP of weather phones, a VP, you know, you get it? And, you know, Apple was able to integrate that together because they had a completely different business model which is you really focus on the customer use case. Then you put applications and APIs in place to access software libraries, and you have one data lake for the entire company. So there's two different business models here. There's two different types of operating models here. And what's so key is if you go back to the turn of the last century, as companies were replacing steam engines with electrical engines, and they asked themselves, well, why isn't productivity increasing? It's because they were hooking up all the same ropes and pulleys to the electric motor that they used to hook up to the steam engine. And that's what's happening in companies today, is we're trying to introduce artificial intelligence into those organizations without changing the business model or the operating model. And we're asking ourselves, why aren't we gaining the efficiencies that we were looking for? So we have to think about how we change the model. And one way to, one thing to think about, I mean, it's a question I get asked all the time is, hey, I'm in a traditional value curve company making products today. How do I transform my business into one of these increasing returns businesses? And one of the ways to do that is to insert an AI engine. And the way the AI engine works is you start collecting data from your product. You collect data from your customers. You collect data from your process. And that data builds more intelligence into your organization that allows you to make better products so that you get more customers, so that you get more data, and you get this virtuous cycle. And so the key is ask yourself, how do you move from atoms to bits, but then use those bits to make better atoms? And that's the virtuous cycle of combining these two business models. A great example, you know, I admit it, I'm old enough to remember the days where I'd buy a turntable, a big old honking amplifier, those big speakers, you know, and put on like Led Zeppelin 4 and to listen to Stairway to Heaven, you know, I mean, I remember those days. But, you know, as soon as you can turn a voice into a command, all you have to do is say, hey, Alexa, play Stairway to Heaven. And this number is actually small, it's 70% now. Almost all of our music is listened to through some type of streaming service on some type of smart speaker. And that's an example of that transformation. So when you think about inserting AI into your business, there's kind of 3 levels of maturity you can think about. The first one is what I'll call AI optimized. You keep your same business model, you keep your same operating model, and you optimize things like accounts payable, accounts receivable, and processing automation, whatever it might be, by optimizing your business model. And American Express does this. They've actually been doing this for decades, using AI for fraud detection. But you optimize your business by doing what you already always have done, but you optimize that with AI. The next level of maturity is AI enabled, where your business model couldn't even exist without AI. It's an AI enabled business model, like Tesla. Self-driving features. There's no way they could offer self-driving without AI. The battery optimization, that happens with AI. The software upgrades that make your car faster, that happens with AI. So they have an AI-enabled business model. And then the highest level is AI first, where you actually start with AI and then you create your company. And that's what Moderna did. I don't know if you know this, but when the Chinese government loaded the SARS-CoV-2 virus code on the internet, within 13 days, Moderna had the vaccine in silico in the computer. That's how quickly they were able to design the vaccine for COVID-19 in the computer, because they were an AI first company. It took another year to manufacture it, test it, and for people to have an injection. So they use AI for, drug design, personalized medicine, and every aspect of their business. So when you think about AI today and how rapidly it is integrating into our society, ChatGPT is a great example. I mean, there's a lot of other generative AI tools out there, but ChatGPT is the one that really got everybody's attention. And the reason why is, if you look at the slide on the left, this is how long it took to get 1 million users. So Netflix took 3.5 years to get 1 million users. ChatGPT took 5 days. On the right, you see how long it took for modern adoption, to have critical mass. 37 years for electricity, 27 years or 23 years for the computer, 21 years for the smartphone, 17 years for the internet, 10 months for ChatGPT. That's how fast it's integrating into society. So my question is, How many people use ChatGPT at least once a week? How about once a day? About every 15 minutes. That's kind of me. I almost like, it's almost like I got to stop because I need to think for myself sometimes. But if you look at globally, so there's these 16 countries, and globally about 55% of people are using ChatGPT in their job, not their personal life, but in their job. 40% use it once a week, 15% use it once a day. But you can see places like India where 83% of the employees are using ChatGPT or either on a weekly or daily basis. And these numbers are old. I don't have the date on here. I thought I did, but I think the date was February 2024. So a few months have passed since these data were collected. So when I talk about AI, let me just put that into a little bit of context. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, that's this broad term of artificial intelligence, which includes, planning, speech recognition, even like GPS in your car and so forth. But it's the ability of a computer to do tasks that are usually done by humans. If you take a click down, machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, it uses historical data as input, and then it predicts output values, okay? Neural networks tries to simulate the brain. I mean, they call them neurons, but basically they're interconnected nodes. And I'll show a diagram of what these interconnected nodes look like, at least from a linear algebra perspective. But if you think about, it's using these layers to actually make predictions based on data that you put into it. And then deep learning really can recognize patterns that are a human mind can't even comprehend it. So this is where, it's so complex that it would be difficult for a human to find trends. A deep learning algorithm can do that. And then a subset of deep learning is generative AI. So generative AI uses deep learning techniques and neural networks to actually create new text based on the information that you provided. And so some of the Gen AI tools out there today, ChatGPT for text, Midjourney for image, Audio Candy for sound, Imagine for video, and there's literally hundreds of these out there today. So what's the difference between machine learning and deep learning? So machine learning, you actually have a human in the loop or some type of reference data in the loop that actually does the feature extraction. And then think about this as almost like a decision tree of if then else statements. And so you put in all the feature extractions of an automobile. It's got 4 wheels, it's got 4 doors, it's got windows, and you describe that. Then using a machine learning algorithm, it can differentiate when you show it a new picture to say it's either a car, or if it's a house, it will say not a car, or if it's a dog, not a car. But it can determine what are cars and what are not cars. Using deep learning, using these neural networks, the deep learning algorithm actually does the feature extraction and characterization all simultaneously if you provided enough data. You showed enough pictures of cars. The next time you show it a picture, it'll know if it's a car or not a car, not by you telling it it has 4 wheels and everything else. It'll discern that by looking at enough cars. It'll decide that for itself. And so when you think about deep learning, there's, simple neural net is basically you have input layers, you input your data, then there's these hidden layers where the computation actually takes place, and then you have an output layer that gives you the answer that you're looking for. And so then the sophistication of the unit is the depth of the number of layers. And the most important thing is all these interconnections. And, ChatGPT has billions, if not trillions, of these interconnections in its neural network. And so the way ChatGPT works, or Copilot, or Gemini, or Claude, or any of these other generative AI tools out there, is you have some question on your mind. And then you formulate that question into a prompt. So you organize the question in a way that the algorithm can be successful. And then the algorithm has access to data. The more data it has access to, the better the answer is going to be. And so those are all your input variables in red. Then you have the neural networks and the depth of the hidden nodes to create some type of response. So let me just show you a few examples. And you guys have all played with ChatGPT, so I'm sorry if this is like me trying to show you. Let me show you how to work the internet. You click here to get a, one day this is going to be like, showing somebody how to navigate their refrigerator. Well, all you do, and I always like to tell it to act like something. If you're trying to get, like let's say you want to know you're about to go see your doctor or something, I would, say, act like, I don't know, a physician, and use the internet to use WebMD to access information and answer the following question. You kind of got to guide it that way. And so what I said was act like an executive member of the Wisconsin Dairy Products Association and write a letter to members explaining the importance of AI. And then you just hit enter. And the beauty of it is it's not like Google where it's going to go find a bunch of stuff that you got to sift through. It does that for you, and then it just writes a letter that you can then, it's maybe 60 to 80% right, but you can take it and then you can modify it for your use. But, it says that the benefits are predictive analytics, robotic milking, health monitoring. Advantages are increased productivity, enhanced quality control, cost efficiency, and sustainability, and then has a nice, close. But you can use it for generating those kind of letters. It does that very easily. The other thing I thought would be helpful, because later on it will show a roadmap on how to get started in AI. And so what I did was I said, this is a plugin called Whimsical. There's hundreds of plugins that you can use on ChatGPT. But what Whimsical does is create mind maps really nicely. And so I said, create a mind map showing how AI can improve the efficiency of the dairy products business. And you hit enter and it just does that. I mean, just in seconds, it creates a mind map. And the beauty of this is these are great places to start. If you're in production, it's like, well, hey, how can we use AI for predictive maintenance of our equipment? Or if you're in supply chain, how do we do better demand forecasting? Or sales, how do we anticipate what the customer wants before they even tell us they want it? And so forth. But these are just, and you could do another prompt and just say, give me 10 times more examples or whatever. I mean, it would just do it. But it's a great place to start if you're thinking, okay, what might be a good place to start? Maybe I want to do financial forecasting, or maybe I want personalized customer support, and that's the first project I'm going to try. My advice would be pick something that's easy to execute, that creates a lot of value, so that you get the cash register to ring as soon as possible, and you use that success to fund the next project. Don't try to do the most complicated thing first. I would say do the simplest thing that creates the most money with the data that you got. And then for fun, if you're on a trip, you can just tell, ChatGPT, create a one-day itinerary for a trip to the Fox Cities. And, again, it bangs out just kind of I don't even know how it does this. I guess one day this will be advertising, generated or something, but, it puts together itinerary, and then you could say, well, I don't like the town council, give me another suggestion or whatever. And then this last example I'll show you, this is OpenAI's tool called Sora. And what Sora does is you just type in text. In this case, a litter of golden retriever puppies play in the snow. Their heads pop out of the snow. And then with just that text, nothing else, it creates a video. And you can start to see why Hollywood's so concerned about generative AI. I'm an executive advisory member to Stanford University's High Impact Technology Fund. And last year, so I'm under an NDA, but what they showed me last year was basically this. But the example they showed me, which was really cool, was you could take a movie like Titanic, and all you do is you type in, replace Leonardo DiCaprio with George Clooney, and hit enter. And the whole movie, and they showed this clip where it was George Clooney's voice, a young George Clooney replacing Leonardo DiCaprio through every scene that they showed. So, again, you can see why Hollywood's a little concerned about generative AI. So what we're seeing is this incredible explosion. This slide in 2023 said 75 billion invested in AI companies. And so last night I got on the internet and I was looking and trying to figure out, okay, what is it in 2024? So from 75 billion in 2023 to $235 billion being invested in AI globally. That's a global number. About 2/3 of that number is the US. And then, almost the other third is China, and everybody else is, small. But the reason I show this slide is what's so powerful about it is you can see that there's AI companies in every stage of the value chain, every part of the supply chain. And the question becomes, how many of these companies are you working with? How many of these companies do you know? I mean, you see Zoom. I mean, everybody knows Zoom. But, somewhere on this page is the next Apple, Amazon, Google that's going to emerge in the next 5 years. And so one of the questions I always get asked is, hey, where would you invest? Which company would you invest in? And what I always say is, in 1849 during the gold rush, people panted for gold didn't make the money. The people who made the money were people selling shovels and selling Levi's. And the company that's making the shovels today is NVIDIA. And so NVIDIA makes the chips that makes OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT work. And the market capitalization of NVIDIA, so this is the GDP of countries. You can see if NVIDIA was a country, it would be number 12 at 1.97 trillion. And anybody who's been watching the stock market, that's an old number. So that was February. This slide is from February 2024. And I looked last night, and they're over $3 trillion in market capitalization. I mean, just since February. So they were, just a little bit smaller than France as a country in market capitalization. So incredible value is being created here. And what's really interesting, these data come from ARK Invest. And what ARK Invest says, that there will be more wealth created in the next 10 years than was created in the last 100 years. Let me say that again. More wealth will be created in the next decade than was created in the last century. And it's going to come primarily from these 5 technologies: blockchain, genomic sequencing, advanced robotics, energy storage like batteries, and artificial intelligence. And what they've plotted here is the estimated economic impact of things like the steam engine, electricity, computers, internet. And you can see that they're just completely dwarfed by these technologies. And you can see that in the previous slide, investment from 75 billion to 235 billion in 1 year. There's massive investments that are happening in these technologies today. And the reason I show you this slide is to just ask yourself, how are we tapping into blockchain, or robotics or energy storage or artificial intelligence, not as investments, but to radically transform our businesses, to generate more revenue at a lower cost than ever before. So what are the implications of all this? I'm going to throw in a lot at you, but what are the implications? Well, one of the things that we see is that AI is completely outperforming humans on almost every. So July 6, 2023, that was the first time that AI outperformed humans on a creativity test. But you can see that image recognition, speech recognition, reading comprehension, almost, mathematics. And this is an old slide, so it's even higher than that today. So the first thing you see is AI is outperforming human performance. And McKinsey did this study where they have said that AI is going to increase the global GDP by 16% by 2030, adding $13 trillion to the global economy. Companies that embrace AI will grow 2 times faster than their competition, and non-adopters will shrink by 20%. IBM did this study that shows that skills of your employees need to change. It's not that STEM, it's not that science, technology, engineering, mathematics isn't important. It's just that so much of that's going to be done by the computer that what we really need to have are people that understand how to work with teams, how to communicate, how to be empathetic, how to be ethical, how to get things done, to do those things that only a human can do that a computer will never be able to do. I actually wrote this blog about a year ago, and the blog was, once artificial intelligence exceeds human intelligence, EQ will become more important than IQ. And when I talk about EQ, it's not just emotional quotient. You know, it's the empathetic quotient, the ethical quotient, the ability to envision the future, the ability to empower others, the ability to do entrepreneurship, to turn ideas into money. All the things that make us human are going to become more important than ever before. And so I talk about AI as augmented intelligence, you know, rather than it being artificial intelligence. I see it as a tool. But people always ask me, well, will AI take my job? And my answer is no. But somebody who uses AI better than you might take your job. And so how do you utilize these tools to make you more efficient and more effective than ever before? So how is AI being used in industry? And what I did was I looked at not just AI and machine learning, but robotics, industrial IoT, and augmented reality. It's changing the business model, it's changing the operating model, and it's changing how companies interface with their customers. So a couple examples. Airbus is using augmented reality to look at, you know, up to 80,000 components. It used to take them 3 weeks. They can now do it in 3 days. Valmet is using the Internet of Things to reduce the downtime of their operations and lower costs. ABB is working with this is a Swiss company to make bathtubs, but they're using robots to do the most hazardous parts of the job. And then Colgate's partnered with Augmenter to use AI to reduce the amount of time it takes them to do maintenance. So those are just some examples across industry. In the dairy products industry, and I'd be interested to know, you know, how many people, and I don't know how many people in the dairy products industry are here today, and maybe Amy, you can answer this, but, you know, as I look at AI in milk production, AI is being used to monitor cows' health, to manage robotic milking stations, feed optimization, predictive analytics, supply chain management, and so forth. And it'd be interesting to know that might be something to actually poll the members on, you know, how are they utilizing AI? What has worked, what hasn't worked, you know, how much is hype, how much is reality, you know, because there is a lot of hype out there today.
A lot of plants are using it, utilizing robotics, or things used to be very labor intensive. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of use of robotics to help change the way that employees are doing their jobs and making the plant safer, more efficient. Yeah.
But the other thing I looked at was just beyond milk production was just across the dairy industry. So Amalthea uses AI to achieve consistent cheese quality, optimizing milk usage, reducing variability. Chobani actually uses AI. So what they do is they basically have a lot of surveys with customers, and then they want to gain some insights. So again, when you have a vast array of complex inputs, AI can synthesize that data much quicker and better than the human mind. So they're trying to identify emotional sentiment to improve their products. Danone is they're partnering with Google and Microsoft and others. Their aim is to upskill 100,000 employees worldwide by 2030 using AI-based training. And then Unilever uses computer vision to basically look at vending machines, and this is globally now, to really manage their stock, submit orders, you know, determine when things are out, that kind of thing. So you might be asking yourself, well, hey, how do I get started? Maybe you already have started and you're way ahead. But so how do you get started? And the first thing I would say on this AI journey or on the innovation journey is you got to get out of your comfort zone. And I think too many times we wallow in our comfort zone. And all the magic happens outside of our comfort zone. You know, I saw this quote one time I loved, which is everything you want in life is on the other side of fear. You know, and it's really true. And a great example of a company is probably an overused example is Kodak. They couldn't get out of their comfort zone. And what's so ironic about this is Kodak's brand was Kodak Moments. You know, you capture the moment with Kodak film. And this is a picture of their first digital camera prototype. So not only did they have the brand of capturing a moment in time, they actually invented the digital camera, but they aren't Instagram. And why aren't they Instagram? They couldn't get out of their comfort zone. And so to get out of our comfort zone, I think one of the things that we've really got to embrace is this growth mindset and not be a victim, and so, a growth mindset, embraces challenges, takes feedback. We get feedback all the time. Sometimes we ignore it, sometimes we keep it, but, really listen and understand feedback. Don't give up, continue to persevere, put in the effort to grow. But I think this is the most important one, is to be inspired by the success of others, not be threatened by the success of others. And I think more importantly, help others be successful. I think the best way to be successful in life is to help others be successful. I was an executive in 2 major corporations. And one of the things that I found after 35 years in industry is the best way to have power and control is to completely give it away. The more you hold on to power and control, the less you have. The more power and control you give to others, the more influence you have in an organization. So, don't be just inspired by the success of others. Help people be more successful. I'm going to go through this slide. I'll go through it as slow or fast as you want, but I think this is really important, not only for AI or AI journey, but any complex change you're going to do in an organization. This comes from the American Productivity and Quality Center in Houston, Texas. And what they say is, if you want change in an organization, you first have to have a compelling case for change, a vision of what's going to be better if you make that change, give people the skills they need to be successful, tell them what's in it for me, make sure that there's incentives for people to actually do it, give them the resources they need, money, equipment, tools, and then have an action plan so that you can actually drive this change. But what's so cool about this tool is, if one of these things is missing, you can anticipate what you're going to see in the organization. The other power of this tool is you can use it as a diagnostic. So if you've rolled out your change and people are really skeptical, like, what? What it means is you haven't communicated a compelling case for change to the organization. So if people are skeptical, you don't have a compelling case for change. If you don't have a compelling case for change, you better expect skepticism. If vision is missing, people are going to be confused. I get the case for change. We got to get on the AI train, but I don't understand what it's going to look like when we're done. Help me with the vision. If people get the case for change, they really bought into the vision, but they don't have the skills. I don't even know how to do AI. I don't even know what deep learning means. I'm anxious about that. You got to give people the skills they need. If they don't have the incentives of what's in it for me, you're going to get gradual change. If people don't have the resources, they get the vision, they've got the skills to do it. They know their big bonus is waiting for them at the end of the year, but they don't have the dollars or the equipment or the tools or the capability they need, they're going to be awfully frustrated. And lastly, if you don't have an action plan, you're going to just get all these false starts. So you can use it to anticipate, if you're missing something, what's going to happen in the organization. But I think more importantly, you can use it as a diagnostic to say, hey, we've rolled out our change model, but we're just getting this gradual change. Maybe people don't really understand what's in it for them. We need to really, beef that up. So one of the things that I think is going to be important as you think about what I talked about earlier with the business model and the operating model is, I think that the journey that we're on, not only in the dairy products industry, but every industry, is ask yourself, how do you move from products to insights based on data to experiences? And the change is, the business model is from atoms to bits to neurons. So yeah, you can make money by moving physical product from location to location, but if you collect data from those products, your process, and your customer, you get new insights that you can actually create more value. But the highest value is when you can spark a neuron in somebody's mind, and you get a sense of joy when you're using that product. You know what that feels like. It's the reason why people wait in line for the Apple 18 when it just looks just like the Apple 16. There's an anticipation that happens. So think about, with your business model, your operating model, how you go up the chain of value creation by moving from atoms to bits to neurons. This is something I learned at Kimberly-Clark. When I was at Kimberly-Clark, one of the things that I was in corporate research, developing new innovations, and a lot of innovations that I thought were really compelling didn't make it to market, and tried to understand why that was. And what I found was, if any one of these five is missing, the whole thing falls apart. So the first thing you have to have is a value proposition that the customer actually understands and addresses some type of tension in their life. So even if it's a business to business, you're working with a company, what is their biggest pain point? What is their biggest tension? And how do you create a value proposition that they actually understand? The second is you got to have a business model where not only you make money, but everybody in the value chain makes a sufficient return on investment. The third thing you need is a go-to-market strategy that you can actually execute through existing channels or new channels you have to create. The fourth thing is a pipeline of innovation that creates a successive waves of anticipation in your customer, kind of like the Apple iPhone again. If you just have a one-trick pony, you get it on the market, then what? And then lastly, and it's kind of in this order, you have to have a technology that gives the customer a reason to believe, and more importantly, the business a reason to believe to invest. And if any one of these is missing, again, the whole thing falls apart. So these are kind of, I need to keep track of time. Okay, but one of the things I think is really important is skills assessment and then workforce development. And as I think about artificial intelligence, there's three things that I think are vitally important as we create what I'm calling the 21st century worker. The first thing that we need to do is to increase the digital IQ of our talent, help them understand what is machine learning, what is deep learning, move from buzzwords to actual understanding of what these tools are and how to utilize them. The second thing we need to do is to put new tools in our workers' hands. Today, you can give them an iPhone, a PowerPoint, Excel, Word, but we need to help employees do social listening so that they can anticipate what the customer wants before they can even articulate it. We have to be able to do virtual product prototyping, actually make the products in the computer before you actually make any physical product. Be able to do virtual product testing before you make a physical product, and then use machine learning to optimize our products, our process, our customer interface, so that we can make products better, faster, and cheaper than ever before. The third thing that we need is data. And so we have to have data standardization in the company so that we can do knowledge management, so that we can do agile learning, so that we can support a platform of generative AI. So now your employee has these data, they can stand on this platform of generative AI with these new tools and this new understanding to create new business opportunities for your company. So where do you get started? I think the best place to get started is you got to educate yourself. You got to educate your team. Think back to that mind map I showed earlier. Identify some business need. You're going to optimize accounts receivable, or you're going to optimize forecasting, or whatever it is that your pain point is that's going to create the most value for your company in the shortest period of time. But you also have to assess your data. Make sure that you have the data that you need, the data is clean, so that you can actually solve the problem that you're going after. My advice would be don't try to do it alone, at least starting. There's a lot of AI partners out there. There's a lot of AI tools out there. Select the right tool, select the right partner, or just select a partner and tool and get a pilot started so that you can, learn. Sometimes, perfection is the enemy of good enough. You just got to get started. And as you get started, focus on integration and scalability. If this is successful, how are you going to integrate it and scale it? Make sure that you address ethical and privacy considerations with the data. Monitor and optimize this, stay informed and adapt, because, the educate piece, it's always changing. It's changing rapidly. And then if it's successful, expand it. So I think that's a simplified roadmap to consider as you're starting your AI journey. And as you think about educating yourself, man, there's just tons of free tools out there. It's amazing how many free tools. I mean, you go to Harvard if you want. I mean, you can go to MIT, Google, a lot of companies. And these are actually, I've taken a lot of these courses. They're actually really good. Google has some great courses on generative AI, and it's all free. So in fairness, I'm actually on the board of this company called Midpoint Consulting. But what we're doing, so it's not really for industry, so I didn't feel like it was a real conflict of interest here, is what we're doing is we're developing AI curriculum for technical colleges to provide their industry partners to teach their workers. So we've got to deal with Fox Valley Technical College where we've developed, and it's all a white label, so it just looks like Fox Valley Technical College. It's not going to be, Elevate U. And so the last thing I would leave you with, and I really mean this sincerely, is I do believe the best way to predict the future is to create it. And quite frankly, there's nobody better to create that future than the people in this room, right here, right now. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Anything that I said that you're like, that doesn't sound right, or anywhere you want to take it.
Pete, I've got a question. You heard Wade introduce yourself and say that this is the first of many in the series. Can you give us an idea or maybe a suggestion where we start with that first next one?
I'll tell you what I think a first next one would be great is not have a speaker and actually have the members talk to one another about what have you tried, what have you learned, what has worked, what hasn't, and I would almost make it a round table and use that round table to identify the biggest common challenges and then go get speakers who can address those common challenges. Because otherwise you just get people up here pontificating on stuff that, hey, well, that was really interesting. And, I had a nice cup of coffee and ate a cookie and left and nothing really changed. But if you get people together and start talking about what they're working on, what their challenges are, and identifying the biggest common roadblocks, and then getting people in here that can, that would be my suggestion, Amy and Kevin. Yeah. Let's get real with this thing, because there's a lot of, I'm from Oklahoma. After all said and done, there's more said than done. That's a whole deal. Yep.
Quick question. So you talked about smart enterprise based on bits versus atoms, right?
Yeah.
Are there any case studies or companies out there that's been the ones that have done the best job of transitioning from that atom base to the bit base? Are there any out there that are good examples that we should look to?
Yeah, all the examples I can think of are meshing them simultaneously versus, I'll tell you the best example I can think of. Yeah, I can think of one, Caterpillar, and actually John Deere. John Deere is probably the best example out there. Not going into depth, I'm a partner at a company called Future Bridge that's based in Mumbai, India, that has done some work in the agricultural space. And it's amazing how John Deere has digitized their line. Go from just making tractors to integrating that with satellite data, using drones. I mean, they have, I think they've done the best job in transforming themselves from a pure industrial player to one that's information based. And there's a bunch of good case studies out there. If you go just John Deere digital transformation, there's quite a bit of good information on there. And Amy, I'm happy to do a little bit of a search and send to you a couple of the case studies I'm aware of. But that's probably the best example I can think of. And they've made a humongous investment. I mean, like over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, it's not like they're just getting started.
Pete, this is Ty Roloff, and absolutely fascinating. Appreciate you taking time to present this morning. I've got two questions for you. The first would be, who do you think stands to benefit the most, whether that's country, population, segment, from kind of the wave of AI that's happening out there today? And the second question is where do you see us at in 15 years? Like, what are things that maybe seem unfathomable today, but that could be a reality 10, 15, 20 years out from now? What's the next thing?
Yeah. The first question, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but this is my greatest fear with all of this, is at an individual level, city level, state level, country level, is we are headed to what I will call the great bifurcation. And what the great bifurcation is there are going to be digital haves and there's going to be digital have-nots. And we're going to see the largest wealth disparity in all of human history, because the people that are the digital haves are going to have much more wealth than the digital have-nots. And my concern is, not to get too philosophical, but unfortunately, our species has solved great social tension by killing one another. And we've got to find a better way this time. And so to your question, Ty, is I think it's so vitally important that we get people educated on these new digital tools and the new digital capabilities, and we foster digital entrepreneurship. I'd like to see Wisconsin become the startup capital of the Midwest. Last thing I want us to become is a digital desert. You know, I mean, one of the things that I've been working on is this idea of creating an innovation triangle in Wisconsin. There's a book called Jumpstarting America. I highly recommend it. And what the author did was they rank ordered 320 MSAs, municipal statistical areas in the United States. And they ranked the top 100 innovation hubs for the next 100 years. Number 18 on that list is the Appleton, Neenah, Oshkosh, Green Bay MSA, number 18. Number 22 is the Milwaukee, Waukesha, West Allis, Racine. Number 27 is the Madison, Beloit, Janesville MSA. And I just keep thinking to myself, how do we connect those three areas together like the North Carolina Research Triangle? So we have an innovation triangle. We're probably easily in the top 10 innovation hubs for the next 100 years by doing that. And then you can tap into other parts of the state, you know, like Stevens Point or La Crosse, and eventually benefit the entire state. But we've got to, it's so critically important at an individual level, company level, a state level, a country level. I took a slide out. One of the slides I had in here that I showed yesterday, I spoke to the Wisconsin Chamber's executive annual meeting yesterday. And one of the slides that I showed was patents by countries. And China is just kicking it. I mean, it's amazing how many AI patents China companies have versus US companies, even though US is making more. So I don't know what the quality of those patents are, but but I don't know if that answers your question, Ty, is that it's really important that we all get educated, that we start utilizing these tools, that we start creating businesses and patents, because it is going to shape what the next decade is going to look like. You know, the thing that you have to remember is Moore's law is going to continue. You know, so Moore's law says that computers are going to get twice as fast at half the cost every 18 months. So think about a business model that's impossible today, but if you believe in Moore's law, it'll be possible in 5 years. Start working on that business model now versus being left behind. You know, think about how these tools are changing. And so to your second question, you know, where things are going to be 10, 15 years from now, you know, with AI, it's one of these things that everybody overestimates what you can do in a year, but everybody underestimates what's going to happen in a decade. And I think we are living in the most transformative decade that probably has ever existed in human history. And, you know, I don't know if you saw the new Meta glasses that Mark Zuckerberg just demonstrated yesterday. But I think, you know, we're going to be moving into a world where we're just fully integrated into the digital world. You know, so I can put on these glasses and, you know, be like, oh, hi, Kevin, you know, and, you know, I know all about this kid, you know, the data's like right here in front of me. And, you know, I mean, that world's coming really quickly. But, you know, 15 years from now, what's the world going to look like? It's hard for me to say, but I think that in today's world, everybody is competing for attention. And I think we're headed to a world where we're all going to be competing for intimacy. And what I mean by that is even though we have all these communication tools, we're communicating to each other less than we have. I mean, we're losing the art of conversation. You know, I think we're becoming incredibly lonely people. These digital tools, you know, my wife pulls out of the garage and she's not even out of the driveway and she's calling me on her phone. You know, I mean, I think we're, you know, I mean, I think so. You know, so I think I'm reading an incredible book right now. And Ty, if you're really interested in this question, because I'm not going to be able to explain it as good as the author. The book was just published this month, September 12th, I think it came out. It's called Nexus. And it's by Harvey Yuval. He wrote the book Sapiens and Homo Deus and 21 Principles for the 21st Century. But his book Nexus is answering your question of where things are going to go in the next 10 to 15 years with computer technology as it relates to the ability to access truth and create control in society. So it's not, that's a long-winded answer to say I don't know, Ty. But I do know that we are headed to a very transformative age. And we need to shape it, or, we need to shape it or it'll shape us. And so I think it's key that we take an active role. And the other thing I would say is AI is going to change much faster than Congress can move. Hoping that regulations and other things are going to be able to manage the change that we're about to see. I think it's going to be up to individuals, it's going to be up to companies, and it's going to be up to co-ops and probably NGOs. Just like we saw NGOs spring up over the last 50 years on sustainable development, I think we're going to see a number of NGOs spring up on what I'll call digital equity.
Thank you.
You have recommendations for companies, you said there's a disparity from the haves and the have-nots and people moving forward. For those companies that are smaller, may have smaller budgets or smaller staff to invest in making these advancements. Do you have ideas for what those companies can do to start that process that's manageable for the size that they are?
Yeah, I mean, and when we talk about AI, it's just, are they using, spreadsheets today, or what digital tools are, it's like, how do you get them to maybe where other companies were 10 years ago or where other companies were 5 years ago, but to start helping them be more of a digital native. And maybe it's tapping into the Microsoft tools, of something like Copilot, and just, getting used to having Copilot in the background, and when the meeting ends, everybody gets an email. Have you guys used these tools like Firefly or Copilot to do your meetings? Where at the end of the meeting, everybody gets an email, there's a little paragraph and, what the action items are and everything else. But just start to not be afraid of these tools, but start utilizing these tools, and so that they can see the next application and the next application, and, it starts to create a flywheel of digital transformation. So what I would say to any company is think really, really big, but start really, really small, and then figure out how to scale fast. But think big, start small, scale fast.
How do you stay ahead of all these companies that are coming out, and you got Gemini and ChatGPT, Copilot, all these different tool sets, and 365 is pretty embedded in business, which is great. So I think that's a great way to start too. But how do you stay ahead of, like, hey, this is an image tool. If you're looking to create image, it's better than using Copilot or some other tool. There's so many.
I don't know if you can stay, ahead, so to speak.
Or even aware of.
Yeah. Well, and that, I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you how many different newsletters I receive every day. I like subscribe to everything, and I probably need to figure out a tool that'll just read all that stuff and synthesize it for me. But I think, it's, when I was at KC, I used to call it the 3 phone call rule. So, right now, 6 degrees of separation, we're 6 degrees separated from all 8 billion people on Earth. But in a company, even as big as KC, you're 3 degrees of separation. And so what I used to always tell people, I used to call it the 3 phone call rule, which is probably old school now. But anything that you want to know, you just call somebody that you know and say, hey, what do you know about computer vision? They'll be like, I don't really know enough about computer vision, but you might want to talk to so-and-so in digital manufacturing. You talk to so-and-so, and they're like, hey, who you really need to talk to is this person. And then all of a sudden you're talking to a person who knows more about it than you ever wanted to know. But it happens outside the company too. And LinkedIn's amazing. I mean, I'm amazed at how many people respond to, if I do, even somebody I don't know, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just wanting to, understand this aspect of your technology. And, mean, I'm not trying to dig for anything confidential. It's just becoming aware, but I'll connect with somebody, they connect me with somebody else. And, so networking, I think networking is key. To think that you're going to be able to find everything and get everything that you know on your own, it's just not going to happen. I really embrace something I call radical collaboration, which is collaborating within your company in new radical ways to break down silos, but to turn the world into your laboratory to access science and technology better, faster, and cheaper than it did before. Because no matter how much you know about I'll just do like my expertise in super absorbency. No matter how much I know about super absorbency, the world knows more. Even a company as big as Kimberly-Clark, no matter how much they invest in nonwovens, the world out invests them. So how do you use this free phone call rule to connect with whoever has the information that you're looking for? It's amazing how willing people are to share information if you just ask.
Is anybody creating a central place? So like PC Magazine at one time was a go-to place for anything new tech and reviews and stuff. Because a lot of people are wanting to use AI to save time and not take hours to try to figure out how to use AI or which AI to use, is anyone kind of keeping a handle on that? What is the best platforms? What's the best way to use technology? Is there kind of an overreaching organization that's doing that?
It seems like things are getting more decentralized than centralized. But then you can use a tool, perhaps like ChatGPT to ask that very question, to identify, some groups that are trying to do that. But, IEEE, or I don't know who might be doing this, there probably are some on the technology side, forums that are doing that. But for a business person, I can't really think of one. Does anybody know one? I can't think of one off the top of my head. But if I find one, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Quick question. So have you ever read or come across anything with AI regarding population? And what I mean by that is you have an older workforce that's retiring out, but probably has not even dabbled in it yet for the most part. You have a population that's going to, from what I've heard, rapidly decrease, which you see colleges, universities already struggling, and from what I've heard also the next couple of years are going to be very difficult on colleges and universities because of that. But how do you see AI playing into that, or have you ever read anything or heard anything on that?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say to just support what you were just saying is I just saw that the United Nations said that last year, for the first time in human history, there are more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. This never happened, 200,000 years of humans, that has never, but last year we crossed a path where there's more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. And they predict that'll be true for at least the next 100 years. So they called it, like we talk about peak oil, they talked about it as peak child. We've reached peak child on planet Earth. And so, one of the ways that, that I keep hearing is automation and robotics and the kind of cyber physical work. If you talk about like workers, that's the big piece I see is companies are trying to figure out how to radically automate their organizations. It's I don't know if at Dow, we used to always talk, the future plant will have a dog and a man. And the man's there to feed the dog, and the dog's there to make sure the man doesn't touch the machine. But that's kind of the world that we're headed to. So I haven't seen anything specifically age related. What I've seen is a lot on the lack of skilled labor and the utilization of automation, robotics to make up that gap. And probably the country that's leading everybody in the world is Japan. Because Japan has a major age discrepancy in their country, and they're rapidly automating, their industry base. Yeah. Other questions? Comments? I guess I'm hungry.
Yeah, sure. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again for everybody coming. Thanks for those on virtually. Appreciate you guys all making it out to our venue and to this session. I'm sure Amy will have information coming out on future sessions as well. And this was video, right? So
And we'll be posting it to our.
the link will be posted out as well, so people can grab that. And then maybe even pieces or the presentation as well. We could talk about that as well. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Yes, Kevin. Oh, you're good? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.